This is Main Street with Gary Allen. Now, here's Gary.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Main Street. Gary Allen with you. We hope you've, it's been a while since we were on the air, and we hope you've had a wonderful life in between. But we're back now. We're going to be recording shows. Oh, I hear me again. We're going to be recording shows, and then we will patch them out to you as the week progresses along. I have two wonderful guests on today, and we're going to talk about what we're going to talk about there in just a couple of minutes. But I also would like to thank some people very much. Mr. Rick Del Vecchio, my executive producer, Tommy Schitt, who is my board op, as well as my producer. Also would like to thank the Japanese Gardens of Miami, as well as the Elks Lodges of South Florida for their continued support on this particular program. As I said, we're back after being gone for about a year. It's been a lot of fun. I'm so wonderfully excited about being back. I have two wonderful guests that are on today, two gentlemen I've known for a considerable amount of time. We're going to be talking about broadcasting. Is AM radio dead? Is FM far behind? Is podcasting where we're going, or other technologies as they come down the road? We're also going to be talking about the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, because it was 60 years ago this past Friday, or this past weekend, rather, excuse me, which would be Friday, where the Beatles made their appearance in the United States. And on the Ed Sullivan Show, we have some pictures of that. We're going to talk to our one guest about the Rolling Stones. He's in a cover band called Start Me Up. And, of course, I'm talking about Mr. Ron Hersey from WIOD. My other guest is the only one, Joe Johnson, the one and the only, from Magic 102.7, as well as Jukebox Saturday Night. And I just found out he was on Love 94 at one time, and I've known this guy for decades. Here's two gentlemen who have been on the radio in South Florida for decades. They know the business inside out. They've been there. And we're going to talk about radio. We're going to talk about what it is about it that keeps it alive, even though people keep saying AM and FM is dying. Is it really? Joe, Ron, what do you think?
Who wants to start?
Joey the J.
Jumpin' Ron Hersey, rockin' Ron Hersey. You know, Ron and I have, I don't even know how it started, probably with Eric Brandon. It's like, it'd be like, Ron Hersey, everybody. You had to put an everybody out, like you were introducing him from a puke fest. So, but I was listening to Ron when I was like 5. Yeah,
oh, please. Oh, please. Oh,
no, in all honesty, when you guys maybe when you were at She, it was Fox and Hersey, right? Well, it was Fox and the other guy.
Well, if you were 3 in 1980, then I guess, yeah, but somehow I doubt that the math.
No, I doubt it either. I doubt it either.
Darn it, I tried to pull that one off. No, you were at I most remember you from Y100, but from She, of course. And yeah, big fan. We were doing mornings at the same time, so we would tune around and listen to you guys because we had like a Marantz tuner and you could just flip it, which was a great joke. I used to do this to Irene Richards. She did middays at 1194. Oh, yes. And I would she'd go out of the room to do something. She was always doing her hair for PM Magazine or something. And I would move the radio dial just a little bit and it would go, and she'd come running in the room, sit down, try to figure out what's making the noise. She was off the air. Oh, those were the good old days.
Well, that is part of what I'm saying, the good old days. Now, before we get too far in this, Ron, what was it that you listened to or heard to? I know you grew up, somewhere else, the other side, South Florida. What was it about radio that you said, that's where I want to make a living? Or did that decision come later?
Well, I came from a very musical house. My parents were gospel singers. My dad was a guitar player. We always had the radio we had one of those big pieces of furniture for a stereo unit.
Yes.
There was either, albums playing, talk about showing my age, albums or the radio. And I was fascinated. I was more fascinated with commercials on television than I was the actual TV shows.
Really?
I'm doomed from an early age. But I think I narrowed it down. I must have been around 10. My parents took me to the home show in Fort Pierce. Well, I was born and raised in Fort Pierce. So my parents took me to the home show, and I could never figure out how the DJ got the records to start right when he wanted them to start. and how he could get one off the turntable and put the other one down so fast. And I go to the home show, and there's WIRA broadcasting, and it was like an epiphany. There's 2 turntables, you idiot. Wow. So my mind was blown. So I stood there, and then right next to that was Southern Bell Telephone had a display. It was a bank of phones and a script, and you could pick up the receiver and it would record your voice and play it back. Well, the 2 things combined into a harmonic convergence, a perfect storm. And that was it. I was hooked.
How about you, Joe?
Oh.
What hooked you?
I used to win. I used to win stuff all the time, especially from Y100 and Power 96 or 96X.
That was you. That was you.
That was me. I was the listener. What happened was, this was a real contest. Y100 would wait until 96X was in a commercial. And even if Y100 was playing a song, they would turn it down and they would say this, "Psst, check around the dial. You know, it was 96X plays less commercials or whatever." And so I did. I go, oh, yeah, well, it's a commercial break. So I just left them on. And every time there's a commercial break, I called in and I won like 6 times in a row. So the guy said, because I figured out the contest, you know, it didn't take much. So I was always winning albums. And then I was just looking into my LP box for a minute ago. I don't have it. I have it, but it's in there. I won the Bobby Caldwell heart-shaped 45, which you would do for love. Won it from Love 94, so it was around 78. So I won it. They sent it to me, and then it was when I went to play it, it was skipping. So I went and asked if I could return it, and I guess they were in a good mood that day. It was Rick Peters was the program director. He was great friend of mine to this day. And he gave me a new one, and then he told me that I didn't have the weight right or whatever, but I just had the weight right. So then I said I was really nervous, and I go, "Have you got any jobs around here?" And he says, "Yeah. As a matter of fact, the guy in the morning needs help, getting traffic information." That turned out to be Skip Herman. So he was doing mornings at Love 94. There was no skit bits or anything. It was just the mellow rock and the commercials and the news from the guy that did News from Home, Bishop Sheen. Bishop. Probably predates your listening to that station, but I went. What Skip Herman did is he gave me an AM radio that had presets, and I preset one to IOD, to 710, to 790, who was news, 940, and I would go back and forth and get traffic reports from them, and I would write them down. I'd run in and give them to Skip Herman, and the funny thing about him is he played the studio monitor so loud that it was impossible to talk to him, and he would not turn them down. And I'd say, "Hey, I'm here with the Havoc." And he was playing the new Poco album as loud as it would go. And I just said, if this is how right. And then I would walk up to give him the thing, and he would go like this, put his hand like right in my face, like, "Wait, I haven't thought about what I'm going to say on the. So I thought, well, radio is really mean, maybe it's not for me. So eventually they hired Dave Caprita, and then him, and they let Skip move on. And then, and of course he went to She and was a big hit with your former partner, Sonny. So that's how I started in radio, as a winner. And then eventually as a loser, in your last day, they walk you down the hall.
All your stuff in a cardboard box.
Yeah. We don't want to tell you. We don't want to tell you don't have a job, but would you get out of here? There's somebody else coming in your seat.
Well, when we got me and the last huge batch of Magic people before they changed format got fired, it was the worst kept secret because everybody was avoiding us. We were at this event at Markham Park. Nobody would talk to us. The other jock was there, and I knew we were getting fired the next day. But the promo running said, "Listen to Joe Johnson for your Springsteen tickets," right? But I knew it wasn't going to happen. So I'm on the stage with the other guy and I go, "Hey man, go ahead and plug my Springsteen tickets, would you?" He goes, yeah, sure. And then he has to tell the people at Markham Park, "And listen tomorrow if Joe's going to have Springsteen tickets."
That's funny. On my last day at Magic, the program director wanted a meeting when we got off the air at Friday at 10.
That's always, we know what the meeting.
Then I run into Joe's studio to run something off to use for the show that morning. And I look down and we got a brand new jingle package. And I'm like, oh, wow. So I throw the CD in and I'm hitting the Ron St. John, Mindy Lang, Joe Johnson, Eric Brandon. Good morning. I was like, everybody got a name shout but us. So I went in and told my partner at the time was Bill Neal.
Oh,
said,
yeah.
"No, we're getting fired." I go, it's Friday. We've got a meeting with Ed. It's at 10 o'clock. It's the 15th. It's the middle of the pay period. And I just got the new jingle package in the production room. We're not on it. So we'd been there like 7 years, Joe, at that point. So I had an office that was full of junk.
Yeah. How long were you together with Bill Neal, though? How long was that? Like how many years?
Wasn't long.
Yeah, because he had a really bad temper. And I heard him scream at this woman that was just under the general manager. I don't want to throw her under the bus. She didn't do anything wrong. He screamed at her for coming in the door where he was recording something, and he started throwing things and everything.
Yeah.
And it wasn't long after that.
Right. So anyway, it took me the whole morning show to get all of my junk out of the office. And Ed comes in at 10 o'clock, and he closes the door and he turns around and the office is empty. There's nothing on the walls. The cabinets, all the doors are open. And I'm sitting at my desk taking my door key off my ring.
Okay.
So he walks me to the car and he's like, well, he goes, if you need anything, if you've forgotten anything, just let me know. I'll make sure you get it. And he opens the back door and he looks out. My car's backed up at the back door, and there's stuff just stacked all the way to the roof in the back seat. And I said, I don't think that'll be necessary yet.
Yeah.
When you get fired, you get one of those, call me if you need anything. Because I called in and they looked for something and never found it. Then I called back again to my old studio, and the guy in there was like, nope, nothing here. No, that's it. I looked nothing, that's why for the 6 months before I got fired, when the company was bought, I started taking loads because I had that studio for 25 years, that production studio. I had DATs.
I always have to thank you because, we got the bums rush that day, and we had that cart rack in this control room, with tons of drops and stuff. And you got all that stuff dubbed off for me on CD. I still use those freaking CDs.
That's so funny. I wish I would have kept some of the ones I had, because I had for the Saturday night show, I had every kind of drop in on cart, and I think I transferred it to CD at one time.
So with that all being said, gentlemen, is AM and FM radio dead? Is it dying?
Maybe it'll become.
I mean, there were some car manufacturers that took AM out of their dashboard on the car. Now they're putting it back. But every time I hear that AM is dead, FM is not far behind, it's still here.
I was at the dentist this morning, and he had on one of the top FM music stations, and they were running these big, long infomercial spots for the legal teams that you see on TV in the morning and that kind of thing. And I couldn't believe they were at that. And then those typical things you see like in the middle of the night on TV, it didn't seem like they had real commercials. I'm not saying that a law firm's not a real commercial. They'll sue me. But it just seemed like the things are different, I think AM will be like a DoorDash or something. You'll just have your name will come out over the DoorDash or something. I don't know. There's no reason to listen to AM because the signal's not very good. I don't know if it travels farther than FM at night or whatever, but probably not.
Yeah, it doesn't. It depends on the station. I mean, back when I was a youngster, and I'm older than both of you.
You were on shortwave, weren't you, Gary?
Yeah, pretty much shortwave. That's how I learned to talk. At any particular rate, I mean, we'd listen to WQAM. I mean, that was a big station. QAM was it. 50,000 watts of power, and depending upon the night and what was going on, you could hear that station all over the place. WGN out of Chicago, 100,000 watts. You'd hear them in South Florida if the weather was right and the atmosphere was right with this and that and the other, and it mesmerized me. I mean, when I was a kid, my mother would listen to in her business, WIOD when they were on 79th Street, Big Wilson, Bill Calder, Larry King, who I eventually interned with and worked for when he was doing overnights, which was killing me in my classroom activities at the U. But I mean, that's what hooked me was Rick Shaw coming to my school, McNichol Junior High School, with the gold jacket on. But my father had other ideas for me to be an airline pilot. But nevertheless, when I did get into college, I studied journalism. But I keep hearing, Ron, all the time, AM is dead. FM isn't far behind. It's podcasting and whatever's coming down the road. I mean, Joe has a point. I mean, nobody really listens to AM per se.
There's no reason to if you have Spotify and all these apps, or your phone plays through the.
But they do for sports. I mean, all the sports. I mean,
you know what?
Dolphins.
With all due respect to the sports stations, if you add all like 4 of them up or all 5 of them up, it comes out to a 0.5.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, like, are the Dolphins still on? Where are they on now, Ron? Are they
I think
on
they're
IOD?
on Big. They might be. Are they on Big, Ron?
Big and Fox 940.
Yeah, there you go.
And they're AM, correct?
Well,
no,
yeah.
940 is FM.
Well, big is FM. Big is FM.
Yeah,
and
940 is AM. Yeah.
AM.
Yeah. So I mean, still people do when it comes to sports and stuff like that. But the thing that I miss most about radio, and I know about you too, it used to be the competition. It was healthy. It was fun. She was doing this, and Magic was doing this, and Y100 was doing this, and this one was doing that. And it was healthy competition, and it was good. And then the big corporations came along and destroyed it all by taking employees and making them full time with benefits down to. And you two know better than anybody.
Well, when Magic was competing with Waxy, the 2 oldie stations, and I was there, it was really fun because they were listening to Waxy, and they go, "They're going to beat you to the break. You got to go play a Surf and Safari. It's 1 minute and 40 seconds. Now, play it now. Fade this down. You got to beat them to the break." I mean, it was stupid stuff like that. Get the quarter hour, you know? And so we were doing all that all day long, and it gets tiring, but it was fun, you know, at the end of the day.
I think what's happened is I think back in those days it was competition, but you were only competing with other radio stations. And now you're competing with 100 streaming services. You're competing with podcasting. You're competing with a whole lot of other ways to get the song that you want to hear or the content that you want. So it's almost fruitless to try to compete with all of those. You know, back in the day, Joe, like you were saying, when the radio wars, you were only competing really with 1 or 2 stations.
Yeah, I mean, Magic had 1 station.
Right. It was whatever was on your format. You weren't going to go after the sports station. If you were the top 40 station, what would be the point of that?
And there were fun things.
Now you have all these things to compete with. But I was kind of laughing because Joe, you can tell Joe's retired now.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yes.
But if you're in the business, you have to believe that there's a usefulness for it. And I think the use of AM radio has maybe found more of a niche than music stations has, because like it's the only place you can go for local information. And the news stations, yesterday, Saturday, we had that tornado watch in morning, and we got it on the air right away. You're not going to get that kind of stuff from a satellite radio service unless you're listening to the Weather Channel.
And
and I think there's I know, speaking for our morning show on WIOD, we interview a lot of the local law enforcement, local politicians. A lot of our interviews, we don't have a lot of authors on from other cities. We talk to local people. I think as long as AM stations can localize and provide content that's useful, traffic information is so incredibly important. You're like, well, everybody can get it on their phone. Well, I'm sorry, but there's tons of people. It's so easy to just get in your car and turn the radio on and get traffic.
And I hear that, and Ron, I hear that all the time. People say, I want more local content. You know, I'm tired of listening to some blowhard in New York telling me who I should vote for and who I shouldn't vote for. I want to know what's going on locally, what's going on in Little Havana, what's going on down in Opelika, which was a joke that my uncle Tubby used to use on Miami Beach. But you know, what's going on in Hollywood and Dania and Fort Lauderdale and what's going on, in radio. Up here where I live, it's a little bit like that. That's why this show, Main Street, is going to be primarily about South Florida, the people of South Florida, as well as my celebrity buddies from LA that'll be coming on from time to time. But, that's why I wanted you two on to begin with. You're friends of mine. You have been friends of mine. And I wanted to talk about what it is. Do you think the podcasting where do you think that's going to evolve?
Well, I've been involved in several podcasts. I did Behind the Scenes with OCC, the on Orange County Choppers podcast. That I did the editing for that. That was an experience.
Yes, I imagine it was.
And I've done several others. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, is it the future? Yeah, it's here to stay. It's not going to die out. Just because anybody with an interface and a USB microphone, can do a podcast. There's millions of podcasts, and I forget who I was talking to about podcasts, but he said something that was really interesting. Was in radio, you try to be as broad as you can and appeal to as large, as diverse an audience as possible. And he was saying that the thing about podcasting, to be successful, the narrower your focus is, the easier it is to get advertising. If you're doing a podcast about wrestling, anybody that wants to sell tickets to a wrestling event or wrestling gossip or anything, merchandise, anything related to wrestling is going to focus in on your podcast because that's all you talk about.
Yeah.
I had a buddy of mine that was doing a podcast with his morning show partner in Washington, D.C. And they would send me I would pull it up and listen to it, but it was an hour and a half. And it was every week. And it's like, I don't know what, I wish podcasts could be like 15 minutes because, it's hard to be doing something else when you got something else happening. It's a time.
Well, that's a good thing. That's a good thing about this show. We decided to record it. Then we'll put it on YouTube a couple of days from now or on Instagram. And then people can listen to it at their leisure. If they only want to watch or listen to 15 minutes, that's fine. You want to watch the whole program, that's fine, and depends on the type of guests that I have on, but there's another show that I'll be doing before too long. And that's what we're going to be doing, 15, 20-minute shows. It's dealing with a health organization up here in the Palm Bay area, that thriving metropolis, Ron, where the all-night diner still closes at 12 noon. And I know because Joe was up here and it closed.
For good, when I passed
it closed. It absolutely. Ron, if you could, folks, if you're kind of getting the idea, we're on here with Ron Hersey and Joe Johnson, two dear friends of mine who have been in the business for many, many, many years. Joe, you do a show, and Ron, we're going to talk about Start Me Up. Yeah, you do a show called Beatle Brunch.
I do.
And that's a syndicated show throughout the country. And we're going to run the scrolls up down here for people to get in touch with you, and especially you, Ron, with Start Me Up.
I mean, the one thing I'll say about Beatle Brunch, besides a little bit of the history of it, is it doesn't air in this market anymore because when Magic was playing it, they were bought and sold, and now they play 80s and 90s music, that station, different ownership. And it ran on an AM for a couple of months. If you're thinking AM was dead, I don't think anybody ever heard the show. It was a time brokered show.
Right.
So anyway, I have a Beatle Brunch club at brunchradio.com. You go on there, you can hear, there's hundreds. I mean, I put them up every week. There's hundreds of new shows and old brown shows, I call them, going back to the,
there you are with the Fab Four.
That's me with back when I was hired to mix the Revolver album.
Hey, Ron, watch his nose grow here real quick. And by the way, that when this picture was taken was in 1982. He hasn't changed much since then either.
Hasn't changed a bit. Well, look at that baby face.
Look at that. I mean, that's what Coop loves about him the most. He has his baby face. I don't know which one of them look younger, him or Coop. I haven't been able to figure it out.
Maybe you need to increase your prescription. Go ahead.
Yeah. And the thing is that this is the 60th anniversary of the Beatles coming to the United States, performing on the Ed Sullivan Show, and then a week later, they were on Miami Beach, and I may have the hotel wrong. Wasn't it the Duval? It wasn't
the Deauville.
Deauville. Excuse me.
They knocked it down in 22. The people that bought it, I think they paid $2 or $3 million for it. That's the Deauville stage. They were rehearsing. That was that's why John is they're all in beach wear. at that
And
photograph.
show that picture of them with Ed Sullivan on the Ed Sullivan Show, which is really important. That was
Right.
and everybody said, I remember a reviewer, Joe, saying that was a wasted time for Ed Sullivan. These guys aren't going anywhere, blah, 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 blah. And it sort of reminded me of the NFL draft when Dan Marino was drafted. And the guy from ESPN goes, I don't know who's going to coach Dan Marino down there. After all, there's only Don Shula down there. Gee, Don coached Johnny Unitas and Earl Morrall. Gee, I wonder who's going to coach Dan Marino. So that critic who criticized Sullivan for having the Beatles on, unbelievable. But here's my question to both of you. And Ron, we're going to get to the Start Me Up in the Rolling Stones soon. What if the Beatles and the Stones never existed? Never got together, never recorded it, and didn't know. I mean, I know that, what was it, John and no, it was George and Paul knew each other.
Well,
but what if they never existed?
The obvious thing is Joe would be at a loss for content for his Beatle Bunch radio show.
I'd have to play the Quarrymen.
Oh,
and they only had one song. That'll be the day. So, no, you know what? I think that the Beatles were popular for almost a year, more than a year, before they came here. So, and then all the other British groups like Jerry and the Pacemakers and, Dave Smith and the Slipper Zones and whatever,
Dave Clark Five,
the Kinks, the Searchers, all these British groups. But, the coolest thing, here's some trivia for you. The first British artist to make waves in America and have a charted hit was Dusty Springfield. So that's kind of cool. It was October of '63.
Dusty Springfield.
I Only Want to Be With You.
Okay, yeah.
Wishing and Hoping, and a couple of others. But
now I know both the Beatles. I know the Beatles and the Rolling Stones were both heavily influenced by American blues and jazz. I mean, I heard Mick Jagger talk about that numerous times during interviews, Ron, that it was the blues, Muddy Waters in particular, they were in Chicago, really influenced them. And when they quit playing the cover stuff and they start playing their own stuff like the Beatles, things really took off for them.
Well, it was 2 days ago. It was the 65th anniversary of Buddy Holly and the plane crash and killed the Big Bopper and Richie Valens and Buddy and the pilot. And I actually did a show on that last week. That aired last week. It's up if anybody wants to listen on demand. And it was amazing how much the Beatles loved. I mean, I had no shortage of Beatle versions of Buddy Holly tunes to play. It was really kind of cool.
And the Rolling Stones were very big, Ron, with that as well. They really were influenced by jazz and the blues music. And Ron, I don't know if you know this. I don't know if I told you. Joe knows this. When the Stones came through here about 7 or 8 years ago in Orlando, I got to be backstage and I got to meet Mick. What a nice guy. And I said to him, and I thought he was going to throw me off the stage for this one during rehearsals. I said, okay, I know you studied economists in college. Who's richer, you or McCartney? And he looked at me, and Charlie Waters, who could barely hold up his head, God rest his soul. He looked over and he leaned over something like this, and he went, "Yeah, I want to know that one myself." And so Mick goes, "Oh, McCartney by at least close to $1 billion, at least," he said, because of their catalog and everything that they've done. And here's the other thing too, guys. Everybody always thinks that, the Beatles hated the Rolling Stones. The Rolling Stones hated the Beatles. Chad and Jeremy hated this one, the Dave Clark Five, all that other stuff. And that's all a bunch of baloney. They were competition for each other, but they loved each other's music. They encouraged each other. Talk about that one, would you, Ron?
They performed on each other's records a lot of times as well. There was a lot of interaction, especially between the Beatles and the Stones, and they shared a lot of information. In fact, unfortunately, it was the Beatles that suggested the Stones hire Alan Klein to be their manager. And he did to the Stones what he did to the Beatles, which was steal half their catalog. Right. But there was a lot and all of the British groups were friends. It was a very small landmass, so it was very easy to run into each other. Keith said many times that he had gone to school with Mick. He recognized Mick, but the day he was on a train and he looked out and he saw Mick standing on the station waiting to get in the train with a stack of albums of Muddy Waters and other blues artists that he walked over to him, and they wound up spending the afternoon listening to the albums, and they decided to start a band. And then Brian Jones put an advert in the newspaper looking for artists, and Mick and Keith eventually responded to that ad.
Yeah, I used an old Robin Williams joke when I met Keith Richards. I said, Keith, you're the only guy on earth I know that could snort anthrax and go, wow. And he just sat there. He just sat there and he just said, I don't what and he was like, there were guests
over well that night.
Huh?
You went over well that night.
Yes, I did. As I did in Las Vegas on many occasions. I went over very well, very well.
But
Mick just started.
I had him in the aisle. They were headed for the exit.
I get no respect. No, but actually Mick laughed like crazy. He said, "You're probably right. You're probably right." But I mean, getting back to the premise, I mean, the influences and the technology that the Beatles created and what the Rolling Stones did and what they brought to music and what they brought to other groups, if they had never existed, my God, what a void.
Or what about this? What if they had existed in the time and there was social media back in 63 and 64? Imagine John and Yoko trying to get their news out by buying a billboard in Times Square. They would have just put it on. Can you imagine how much social media John Lennon would be doing?
Wow.
The bed ends and the peace and stuff.
But there's also the bad side of that too. I mean, we don't know a lot of the stuff that went on behind the scenes. I mean, when they were off with the Krishna and doing all that crazy stuff, and other stuff. I don't know about the Stones, but the Beatles experimented with a lot of different things in life as they were growing as a group and as men in the business. And I imagine the Stones went through their revelations as well, and they've also. But the interesting part is, except for the drummer, the Beatles have basically remained the same since almost their inception. Whereas the Stones, Ron, have unfortunately lost members along the way, and have had to replace them with excellent musicians as well.
Well, the Beatles, it's amazing when you look at and Joe can attest to this, when you look at the sheer volume of music that they turned out in a really relatively short period of time. They were only together for what, like
7 years, 7 or 8 years.
And in that time, I mean, they were cranking it out,
And the interesting thing is they couldn't put out, they had a policy of not putting singles on albums. So they'd work on an album for 6 weeks and then they'd put out She's a Woman and I Feel Fine just as a single, or Day Tripper as a single.
Right.
While they were making the album, we got to stop and make the single, They could have just been like any band, speaking of the Rolling Stones, I think it was they were just advertising when their latest album came out that it had been 18 years since they released an album.
In 2023, that was the first time original music from the Stones came out in 18 years. And back in back in 2007, they were acclaimed, or before then even, they were acclaimed as over 200 million albums were sold of the Rolling Stones. I mean, whoa, I mean, some people don't even get close to that who have long careers in whatever kind of music you want to talk about. I mean, these are bands that have withstood the test of time, and they continue going on. Ron, aren't the Stones going to be touring here real soon again?
I think they have another tour coming up, and I think there's also been talk of doing some more recording. So
yeah,
I think Keith will outlast us all.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
COVID,
what's the COVID?
Because of COVID here. But and here's the funny thing is, I said this to Joe before, that if the Beatles were all alive, all four of them, and decided to do a final concert, it would take, I think, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks out at the Rose Bowl or whatever arena holds the most people. They would sell out every performance. Every performance.
Yeah. Well, they would, but a friend of mine texted me a couple of weeks ago and said tickets for the Eagles are $5,000.
What?
So you got that going on.
Imagine what it would be for the Beatles or I mean, I don't know what the Stones are going for. Ron, do you have any idea?
The tickets in Orlando for this next tour, really crappy seats, but we were looking, they were pretty reasonable. I think we might go. We saw the Voodoo Lounge tour at Dolphin Stadium. It was awesome.
Oh, okay. Where are they going to be in Orlando? Are they going to be at the football stadium like they were before?
At the fairgrounds, I think. Right?
Well, there's this big stadium there that I saw McCartney there like 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's a football. It's used to be called the Amway or Center or something. Now I don't know what it is, but that's the Amway is where a lot of groups play. That's an indoor arena. The football stadium is down the road about a mile and a half. You can see it, and that's where I saw the Stones, and I was with them for that entire afternoon where they were going through rehearsals and then during the live performance. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. The guys were great. They really were great. And Ron, I want to talk a little bit about Start Me Up. And Tim, if you could, or Tommy, if you could put that stuff up for Ron. I want people to be able to get a hold of them. If you want to get a hold of these guys, please do that. Start Me Up band at starmeup.com. Also for Ron's voiceover world that he lives in, his imaginary voiceover world that he lives in.
They just tell me I'm sending work out. It doesn't go anywhere.
Well, it's like the other day.
It's soundproof room all day. That's the goal.
It's like the other day where I was working part-time till yesterday. One of the servers goes, "Well, Gary, is in show business. He was a comedian. Hey, Gary, weren't you a comedian?" I said, "Well, that's what my agents used to tell me, and that's what the paycheck used to read, but I don't know what I did in between." So I don't know.
My old boss from She, Neil Mursky, I was talking to him the other day, and we were talking about, that lifestyle from the past. And he said, "Yeah, I used to be Neil Mursky."
I didn't want to be one of those jocks that, you'd open up Radio and Records on Friday and it would say, "Have headphones, we'll travel." And it's like, I'm not, I was practically born in Miami, grew up here, went to school and in jail, whatever. Not really. But I didn't want to leave because I remember the general manager at Love 94 when I was pitching myself to be the morning person after the other guy got fired. They said, "You know what you need to do? You need to start out in a small market and work your way up." I said, "I'm in market 11 right now." Right. Where do you want me to go to it's a coal mining town and market number 150 and then work my way back to 12? So I just hung in there because I wasn't going to be doing a
Ron,
job.
how did the concept for Start Me Up begin? I mean, were you a big Rolling Stones fan?
I followed their career for a long time, from a very early age. I actually probably the band that had the biggest impact on me musically was Led Zeppelin.
Yes.
I got to see them at Tampa Stadium in 1973, and coming from Fort Pierce, which was Mayberry at the time, and my dad was Andy Griffith. I was totally Opie. I'd never seen 7 freaks together in a room, much less 70,000. So it was a real eye opener. But I've always admired their work, and I got in a band with a couple of real diehard. Well, we were at Magic with Joe Johnson. Sonny Fox and I had the Don't Quit Your Day Job.
Yeah, for sure.
Our player and our guitar player were diehard Stones fans. And at one point, the guitar player actually hosted a party at his house that was attended by Bobby Keys, who was the sax player for many years. Nicky Hopkins, who was the keyboard player for many years. And Mick Taylor, who was the guitar player who plays Brian Jones. So, after that, I started really paying attention to their stuff. And I had actually given up. I've been in a few bar bands, a few cover bands, and, egos and personalities and all that. And I pretty much decided I was done. I wasn't going to play out in any more bands. And about a month after I made that announcement, I decided I missed playing out again. It's difficult to give up. And I decided, well, I'm not going to be in any more bar bands. Maybe I could do a tribute thing. And at the time, my thought was maybe I'd do a Tom Petty. I do pretty good Tom Petty. So I thought, maybe I'd do a Tom Petty thing. We could do some acoustic stuff, some electric stuff. would mean starting out, from scratch with all new
Yeah.
players and auditioning and all that. Wasn't really into that. So I
We've
came
got some
home, went on
pictures.
Craigslist. About 2 pages in, there was an ad for a Rolling Stones tribute show looking for a Ron Wood. And I was like, oh my God, this is it. And
Yeah.
so I talked to
We've
the
got
guy.
a picture of you.
3 of
We've
us
got a
auditioned.
picture of you somewhere.
What's that?
Tommy, you want to bring that picture up of Ron as Ronnie Woods? I think it's in there somewhere. It's in that. He'll bring that up in just a little bit.
Right.
We've got it.
So I auditioned. 3 of us auditioned. I got the gig, and that was about 5 years ago. And we've gone through a few different changes. I was just talking to the bass player today. We really got the lineup the way we like it, the way we wanted it all along. And
right.
So it's 8-piece, very talented guys. Oh, the band is unbelievable, and the Mick and Keith. And at this point, the Stones really are Mick and Keith. That's the whole focus of the show.
There we go.
There we are. So that's me on the left is Ron Wood, and then that's Shannon Brink, who is our Keith Richards, and Mark Lichtenfeld, who's our Mick, and that's Guy Baldo, who is our Charlie Watts.
Wow.
So that was backstage at a recent gig. So we play a lot over on the West Coast. We're playing the Hard Rock in Tampa in a couple of weeks. It's like the third or fourth time we played there.
As a matter of fact, you've got on March 10th, you're going to be in Venice. And in April 5th, you're going to be in Naples, Florida at the Legends concert.
There I am.
Yes.
There we are. Look at that.
There they are. There they are.
That's me and
then May 3rd, you're going to be in Tamarack, that thriving metropolis, the city of Tamarack. Grass on the greens or groove
What's
on
the date?
greens.
What's the date for that show?
That date on that show is May 3rd at 7 p.m. in Tamarack.
All right.
Tickets are available. And you can also call 561-571-2744. And does Lori answer that phone, Ron?
Well, for a price.
Yes. That's Ron's wife. She's the booking agent for the group. And she's really a wonderful person altogether. Where is the Mount Rushmore for you two in the music business? Who is on Mount Rushmore for you guys?
I mean, I've got 4 in mind. That's pretty easy, but I'd like to branch out.
Yeah.
I think that was an album cover.
Yeah, that was. It was Meet the Beatles or something like that. I don't know. I couldn't do it without either Lennon or McCartney. So if I had to pick one, I would say Paul's, just because he's lived in 40 years longer, or 50, whatever it is. He gets my vote there. Who would you go with, Ronnie?
Well, you got to put Jimmy Page up there. I mean,
right.
What an amazing career too. When we were at Magic and we had Peter Noon do a show and we were talking backstage, and that was Jimmy Page playing a lot of the guitar parts on those Herman's Hermitage. He was a session player. He played on I think some Who stuff, and he played on a lot of different hits. And then of course we joined. Lori and I were talking the other day. He wanted to be in the Yardbirds so bad that he switched to bass because the bass player left, and so he switched to bass just to be in the band. And then Beck left and Clapton left, so it was his band. And
he actually plays on that on the Help album that has the instrumentals. I think he plays on the instrumental of This Boy or something like that. So he does play the guitar on that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but Ron, Ron, you've worked. Ron, you've worked with a number of people: Toby Keith, Three Dog Night, Chuck Berry, Little Richard. You're not a slouch yourself there as a musician, there, sir.
You know what? Sometimes I feel like I'm like running through life like Tom Hanks. It seems like I grew up in the 60s, and I was very aware of music and media from an early age. And just think of all the stuff that went on in the 60s.
Oh, yeah, I know. I was born in 1952, so I was a kid of the 60s.
Right. And so,
but to me, the 60s were 1965 when my brother was drafted by the Baltimore Colts, and then that was pretty much it. And chasing after girls in junior high and high school.
Well, the thing I think about, and I mention to people all the time, just think from 1957 to 1967, we went from like street corner doo-wop to Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, 10 years. I mean, that's a leap, you know? Pink
Yeah.
Floyd. I mean, come on. Can you
Oh, yeah.
imagine like kind of being like in 1957 and having Pink Floyd come out and try to appeal to a crowd of that era? That's why when we were talking about radio earlier, it's not so much that the industry's changed, it's the world has changed and the way people use media has changed.
Yeah.
And
I think the big thing with radio is you have a station that owns a company that owns 150 or 250 radio stations, and
well,
you can't compete with the guy across the hall in your own station.
right.
You know?
And and like you said, and I think too, a lot of the stations in the 60s were mom and pop operations, and
Right.
you know, they didn't have anything to lose, and they would do anything to be outlandish. And that ship has sailed. That's not something you can do in this day and age.
It's the same thing as talk radio, Ron. You and I have talked about this before. Remember when talk radio and Joe down in IOD in particular and KAT, it was fun talk. It wasn't this political right wing, left wing, balderdash. It was fun talk. Bill Calder, Big Wilson, even Larry at night. Loan me $50. I mean, it was fun. It was interesting. It was informative and informational, and sometimes it was just plain fun where they were laughing like crazy. But now it's all serious and everything has got to be this way and it's got to be that way. And I'd always had high hopes that it would come back at least a little bit.
I think everything, there's usually a pendulum swing with everything, but I don't think we're ever going to go back to those crazy. I mean, and I always feel, I know Joe, you probably feel the same way, but I feel very fortunate that I was able to come up in those days of the white acoustic tile and the RCA ribbon microphone and the morning guy that was 250 pounds overweight with a 5-day-old cigar in his mouth, and those were fun days, and I feel fortunate that I kind of caught the tail end of a lot of that. And,
there are people that'll run into me, Joe, if I ever win the lottery, I'm going to buy Magic and put everybody back on the station. I go, what?
No, you're
Don't call
not.
me, because I did it for 29 years and I had a great time. And it's never going to be the same, because you can't even do a live broadcast because there's a 40-second delay now, with the internet or whatever's going on.
Is it now 40-second?
I raised it. Yeah, it was 30. I talk slower.
He has a filthy mouth.
So I wanted to ask you if I could mention, that Ron said I'm retired, but
was it now?
In 2015, I got a call from Star Vista. They're part of Time Life, and they were going to start this thing called the Flower Power Cruise. Yeah. And I met with the president, and he invited me on the first one. So now I'm I'm called the music host. So if there's a panel of different artists I put together from different bands, we talk about the Woodstock or whatever they had in common, the British invasion, different people like that. So I do the Flower Power Cruise, the 70s Rock and Romance Cruise, because I graduated high school in the 70s, so that's pretty easy. And the Malt Shop Memories Cruise, which is a lot Dion and artists right before the Beatles. And also the Disco Cruise. So they're all sold out except for the next year, 25. The Disco Cruise and More has a couple of cabins left. But
I asked him once, Ron, can I carry your luggage and go on the cruise with you? And Joe said, nah, I don't think Coop would appreciate that. And I went, okay, all right, I'm not as cute as Coop. That's for darn sure.
You'll never know, because she'll never appear on camera.
No, she won't. She's got a 2.5-hour makeup job before she comes on camera.
I would have thought I could hold up a picture of her, but here we go.
By the way, just before we, because we got about another 6-7 minutes. There she is. She's one of the most beautiful women. Lori is a beautiful woman. I mean, you both are married. Unfortunately, my ex is no longer with us, but what a beautiful lady she is. What do you think about this Taylor Swift phenomenon that's running through the country? And I don't mean the political part about it, just her and
I think
Kelsey.
It's great.
Yeah.
If I had a 15-year-old daughter, I would say Taylor Swift. I mean, she lives by what she preaches, and she's just lives by example. She doesn't preach. And I think her music generates millions. I mean, we were talking about the Beatles. April 4th, 1964, they had the top 5 songs on the chart. Well, last October,
Yeah.
she had the top 10 songs on the chart.
And she won Album of the Year last night or the other night,
So,
fourth year in a row.
with digital downloading, you can download one song and it starts counting, and she had the top 10. I think she's great. I've never seen her concert, but
I wouldn't know one song from the other.
She sued it. Do you guys know she sued a DJ because they were doing one of those backstage, hey, meet and greets, and she claims he reached down and touched her on the behind, and she sued him for $1, and she won. And she says, I just wanted to prove a point that you can't, And if you ever saw Bill Maher, he goes, if you ever see me in a picture, I'm always doing this because I don't want to ever get accused of, grabbing somebody. So that's happening now. So
I know Bill Maher pretty well, and for his arms to be up like this, let's just say, gentlemen, I know Bill Maher. I know
he recognizes a field goal when he sees one.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. Speaking of which,
wow,
who's going to win the Super Bowl, guy?
Mahomes, man, that guy's he's insane.
Yeah, I think Kansas City, they look like a well-oiled machine.
For the first 11 games, it was looking like the Dolphins, right? They had lost like 2. They had like 11.
Yeah.
No, my brother played in 2. He played in Super Bowl 3 and 5. So, my half brother. So I don't follow the game as much. As a matter of fact, the only team I follow anymore is where I went to school, the U.
Who's your half brother?
You went to PU?
No, we went to the U.
Oh,
University of Miami. University.
Who's your half
brother? You went to U.
Yeah, my half brother was Mike Curtis.
He played for who?
The Baltimore Colts.
Really?
Just look him up. There's a whole video on him.
When I'll tell you a quick story. When the Hurricanes were playing Nebraska for the World Championship in 84, but it was for the 83 season, I was doing mornings with Dave Caprita, and we did a song called "Watch Out for the Hurricanes," and just to cheer them on. And as I was driving home that day from work, there was this big NBC truck at the Orange Bowl. And I just on a whim, I dropped off a tape to a guy in an audio that said, we're playing this on the radio. And I'm watching the game. And as soon as Nebraska went for the 2 points and didn't make it, they started playing that song.
Wow.
They played it.
Yeah.
And it was pre-social media. The phone all day, the next day at Love 94, I just couldn't handle make me a cassette and send it up. And so we did make a bunch of records, which I have in the closet back there.
I love the U. I will consistently.
My wife graduated from the U.
I didn't know that.
My wife graduated from the U as well.
That's right. They talk about
and so
that.
Did and Ron. So did your female. What's her name in the group? In your group,
a vocalist.
Yes, your vocalist.
Talking to Ron.
Oh, that's right. Yes, Astrid went to.
She went to the U. Yeah, a lot of people went to the U. It's a people put it down constantly, but it's a great university. It's not that easy to get into. And it's not that easy to stay there either. If you don't have the money, you're not sticking around. I know because Stallone went to the U and he didn't stick around long.
Whatever happened to him? Whatever happened to that guy?
Yeah, you never know. How about Carl Withers? Huh? That's a young man gone quickly.
Well, Withers.
Thanks for bringing us down.
Yeah, thanks for ending the show on a beat.
No, I'm ending it on this high note. Tommy, please bring up those things for Ron for Start Me Up and for Joe, please. I want people to be reminded again in the short period of time we have left. And I just want to thank both of you guys. Yeah, there we go for the Beetle Brunch.
Just brunchradio.com. They can figure out how to get in on the club and, you know.
And then there we go for Start Me Up. And please go on there, check it out. There's a phone number where you can get a hold of Lori. She's the booking manager as well as married to Mr. Ron Hersey or Ronnie Wood, if you want to call him that. It's okay by me. But anyway, I want to thank both of you for taking the time to join us here on Main Street. You guys are really a joy. Your friendship means an awful lot to me. So thanks again, guys.
Well, Glenn, thanks for having us on.
Gee, thank you so much. And stay right where you are, because after the show and all that stuff, I want to talk to both of you real quick. Anyway, I just want to thank all of you very much. We'll be back next week with another show. And again, I just want to thank the Japanese Gardens for their continued support, along with the Elks of South Florida for their continued support of Main Street with Gary Allen. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.
Ba ba da ba ba.
Hey,
Okay.
love
Yeah.
jazz.
I'm Stu Grant. Stu Grant here with Love
Is he
Jazz.
still around? Is he
I
even
don't know where
around
Stu
anymore?
Grant is.
You know,
He's
man,
He's,
I
he's
used to
doing